You've seen his name in lights, plastered across the most iconic spots on the Las Vegas Strip. But these days, the Nevada Gaming Control Board is telling a different story. A story of a name that's lost its shine. The Wall Street Journal broke the story. A staggering $7.5 million settlement paid out to a manicurist at his signature hotel, a woman whose name we may never know. Do you remember the Vegas he dreamed into existence? The one that promised the world to anyone with a little luck. Not the Vegas we know now with its outrageous resort fees and exclusive velvet ropes. No, I'm talking about the Vegas where 20 bucks in your pocket could make you feel like a king. The Mirage, the Bellagio, Wynn. These weren't just buildings, they were shimmering cathedrals of pure light and imagination. These were places where ordinary people, folks just like you and me, could rub elbows with the high rollers and for one magical weekend truly believe that luck was on our side. And for a time, it seemed like it was. Vegas had its magic back, or so we thought. Then the story started to leak out from behind those gleaming marble walls. So tonight, let's go back to the very day it all started. The date was November 22nd, 1989. Picture it. Most of the casinos were stuck in the past, peddling $1.99 shrimp cocktails under neon signs that sputtered more than they shined. But a new kind of beast was about to awaken on the Strip, the Mirage. A $630 million gamble of pure gold and relentless ambition, the very first of its kind. And at the center of it all, the man himself, Steve Wynn. The visionary who spun an empire from junk bonds, a flair for the dramatic, and a dream to reshape Las Vegas into a spectacle the world had never even imagined. What none of us could have known on that day was that he wasn't just building another casino. He was laying the very foundation for a brand new Las Vegas. A Vegas that, in the end, would leave so many of us in the dust. Part 1. The Rise of Steve Wynn. Long before the dancing fountains and the dazzling fireworks, before the gold-leafed suites and billion-dollar art collections, there was just a kid named Steve Wynn just trying to make it. He wasn't born into wealth. His father ran some less-than-legal bingo games back east, and when his father passed away, he left his son an inheritance no one would ever want, a mountain of gambling debt and a bad name with some seriously dangerous people. Wynn found himself at a crossroads. He could walk away, or he could pay it all back. He chose to pay back every last dime. A burden like that either breaks a man or forges him into steel. For Steve Wynn, it did both. And by 1972, the kid no one ever gave a second thought to had clawed his way to a controlling stake in a little downtown spot called the Golden Nugget. And that's where the legend was born. See, he wasn't just putting up casinos, he was constructing fantasies. He tapped into a secret the old guard of Vegas never understood. People didn't just come to gamble, they came to feel like somebody. And then he had the idea. The one that would change the face of Las Vegas for good. The Mirage. Back then, the idea was just certifiably insane. Your average strip casino cost, what, maybe $200 million to put up? Wynn was talking about a project that would cost over $630 million, and he was funding it all with high-risk junk bonds. Wall Street was laughing. They called it financial suicide. They said the place would have to pull in more than $1 million every single day just to stay afloat. But Wynn? He never even blinked. He just kept pushing, right up to that day, November 22nd, 1989, when the Mirage finally threw open its doors. The Las Vegas Review-Journal reported that over 40,000 people flooded the place in just the first 30 minutes. And when Wynn himself got on the radio and told security, let those people in, he wasn't just opening the doors, he was opening up a whole new era. The old Vegas, the one with the smoky back rooms and cheap shrimp, was officially dead. This was something entirely different. It was bigger, it was louder, it was beyond spectacular. This was the birth of what we now call the mega resort. And if you loved Vegas, if you really loved it, watching it happen felt like witnessing an honest-to-God miracle. The Mirage wasn't just a casino, it was a powerful statement. I mean, white tigers lounging in glass enclosures, a volcano erupting on the hour. Every single detail was designed to scream fantasy. It was Wynn's philosophy in action. Give them a show they can't see anywhere else, and they will open their wallets. And boy, were the critics wrong. The Mirage didn't just hit that $1 million a day mark, it absolutely absolutely shattered it. Suddenly, tourism in Vegas just exploded. We're talking a 16% jump in 1990, one of the biggest surges the city had ever seen. Governor Bob Miller famously called it Disney-esque, and even compared Wynn to the man himself, Walt Disney. And you know what? Back then, it really felt like he was. Part 2. The Empire Expands. After the triumph of the Mirage, Steve Wynn was more than just a casino owner. He was the master architect of modern Las Vegas. And if the Mirage was his Mona Lisa, it turned out it was only his first stroke. Just a few years on, he set his sights on the property right next door. He wanted to build a place that captured all that magic, but added a dash of swashbuckling mischief. The date was October 27th, 1993. Treasure Island rose up from what used to be the Mirage's parking lot, a $450 million spectacle. And right out front, every single night, pirate ships waged war in a lagoon. We're talking real explosions, sinking vessels, and crowds roaring on the strip. And inside, Vegas was introduced to its very first permanent Cirque du Soleil show. Wynn had once again cracked the code. Give people a spectacle they could never forget, then let them wander into the casino to play. But you see, Treasure Island was just the opening act. Wynn was dreaming up something far grander, a vision that would make every casino before it seem like a child's toy. On October 15th, 1998, the Bellagio finally opened its doors, a $1.6 billion statement to the entire world that Vegas was no longer just about gambling. This was about art. It was about pure luxury. It was about status. The lobby ceiling was a breathtaking canopy of thousands of hand-blown glass flowers from the artist Dale Chihuly. It was 2,000 square feet of vibrant color and light that took nearly 2 full years to install. The fountains out front performed a ballet in perfect time to Frank Sinatra, and for the first time in history, a Las Vegas resort boasted its own fine art gallery, showcasing masterworks by Picasso, Monet, and Van Gogh. The Las Vegas Sun reported that the average room at the Bellagio went for about $200 a night, compared to a mere $81 at most of the other hotels on the Strip. Steve F. of the Sun would later call the Bellagio's opening a defining moment in the history of Las Vegas. It was the moment the city finally managed to convince the world that it wasn't tacky anymore. And that right there is the irony, isn't it? Because for us regular folks, the very people who made Vegas what it was, that old tacky version was exactly what we cherished most. The all-you-can-eat buffets, the $5 blackjack tables, and the comps that made you feel like a high roller, even if you were anything but. But Wynn had moved on from that kind of customer. He was chasing whales now, the ultra-wealthy, the kind of high rollers who thought in $1,000 chips instead of $20 bills. The Bellagio had exclusive salons where the minimum bet was $1,000 per hand, and private bungalows that cost $1,250 a night, built exclusively for foreign VIPs. Vegas was no longer a town for everyone. It was for the select few who could afford to act like money was no object. Then, in June of 2000, Wynn sold all of Mirage Resorts, his entire life's work, to MGM Grand Incorporated for a stunning $6.6 billion. He made an absolute fortune, $21 per share, and walked away with deep pockets and a legacy that seemed set in stone. But a full 5 weeks before that sale even closed, he had already made his next move. Wynn went and bought the Desert Inn for $270 million, just to tear it down. He vowed to build something on an entirely new scale. What followed was his most magnificent vision, but it was also in so many ways the very start of his downfall. And that brings us to part 3, The Empire Moves East. By the early 2000s, Steve Wynn had already reshaped the Las Vegas Strip twice over. But if the Mirage made him a legend and the Bellagio crowned him a king, his next project was meant to make him utterly untouchable. When he sold Mirage Resorts to MGM for that cool $6.6 billion, just about everyone figured he was going to retire. I mean, he'd done it all. He reinvented Las Vegas, cashed out richer than anyone could imagine, and walked away with a fortune most people only dream about. But Steve Wynn was simply not built for a quiet retirement. Just 5 weeks before that massive sale was officially finalized, he dropped $270 million to buy the Desert Inn, one of the Strip's most legendary icons. And then, with the unsettling calm of a man who remakes the world in his image, he demolished it. On April 28, 2005, the world watched as Wynn Las Vegas opened, a $2.7 billion monument to wealth, perfection, and absolute control. I am Steve Wynn, and this is my new hotel. It's the only one I have ever put my own name on. This wasn't just another resort. It was Steve Wynn's personal statement, a declaration to the world that said, "I am Vegas." Every single inch of that property was radiating with intention, from the intricate floral mosaic floors to the vast lake out front that shimmered like a sheet of flawless glass. It was meticulously designed to feel expensive before you even spent a single dime, and for a long time, it worked. Wynn Las Vegas became the ultimate playground for the world's elite, a place where the room keys somehow felt heavier and the minimum bets were higher than most people's paychecks. But Wynn's ambitions had grown far bigger than Nevada. He had set his sights on the next great frontier, Macau, a small Chinese territory that had just opened its doors to foreign casino operators. On September 6, 2006, Wynn Macau opened, his very first international property and by far his boldest gamble yet. Within just a few years, that gamble paid off on a scale bigger than anyone could have ever dreamed. By the final quarter of 2017, the Macau operations were generating about $1.3 billion of Wynn Resort's total $1.7 billion in revenue. That's roughly 76% of the company's entire income. Macau wasn't just another market anymore. It had become the market. Wynn doubled down again with the Wynn Palace, which opened on August 22, 2016 in Macau's Cotai district. Its cost had swelled to $4.1 billion, and Wynn himself called it his most ambitious undertaking, the most audacious, and you could say, beautiful project he had ever imagined. We're talking a resort with 1,700 rooms, actual gondolas sailing on a man-made lake, and a level of opulence that made you feel like you'd walked into a fairy tale kingdom. But back home in Vegas, we were all watching this unfold with a knot in our stomachs. I mean, sure, the places he built were absolutely stunning, but you could feel the very soul of the city starting to shift. The minimum bets at the tables just kept creeping up. The slot machines felt like they never paid out anymore. And those easy comps, the things that made you feel like a high roller, they just vanished. Those $10 blackjack tables? Yeah, try finding one for less than $50 now. The buffets that used to be a steal? $60 a person, and that's if you were lucky enough to even get in. It was clear Vegas was winning more than it ever had before, but the people, the ones who built this town, were not. We couldn't see it yet, but the hairline fractures in Wynn's kingdom were already there, and they were about to tear the whole thing down. This brings us to part 4, the spectacular fall of Steve Wynn. It's wild to think about it now. For so many years, Steve Wynn wasn't just in Las Vegas, he was Las Vegas. The visionary, the ringmaster, the golden boy. And yet, all it took was a single headline to completely incinerate that entire legacy. In Las Vegas, his name is synonymous with luxury, the man who's built some of the biggest casinos on the Strip. But tonight, Steve Wynn is under fire. The story dropped like a bomb. Wynn was being accused of some serious misconduct by dozens of his own employees, allegations that he flatly denied. The official complaint didn't just mention these stories, it laid them out in detail, referencing the gaming board's very own investigation into the matter. A formal complaint filed on a Monday stated, and I quote, "Mr. Wynn has repeatedly violated Nevada's gaming statutes and regulations, bringing discredit on the state of Nevada and its gaming industry. It concluded that he is, quote, unsuitable to be associated with a gaming enterprise or the gaming industry as a whole. And you know, according to CNBC, the stock for Wynn Resorts took a nosedive of nearly 10% on the very day that story broke, which vaporized about $2 billion of market value. By Monday, it tumbled another 9%, landing at around $165 a share. Think about that, an 18% collapse in just a couple of days. Heavy hitters like Morgan Stanley and UBS immediately downgraded the company. The consequences were immediate and brutal. Within 24 hours, Wynn was out of his job as the finance chairman for the Republican National Committee. Suddenly, the Nevada Gaming Control Board and the Massachusetts Gaming Commission were launching full-blown investigations. Even regulators in Macau were on the case. Then, on February 6, 2018, a mere 10 days after the news hit, Steve Wynn resigned as the CEO and chairman of Wynn Resorts. He walked away from the very empire he had built, the one with his own name plastered on every single building. In his resignation letter, he tried to explain, "I have found myself the focus of an avalanche of negative publicity. I have reached the conclusion that I cannot continue to be effective in my current roles." His longtime right-hand man, Matthew Maddox, was the one to step into the CEO position. By April of 2018, Wynn had cashed out completely, selling off his entire 12% stake in the company for around $2.4 billion, a fraction of what it was worth before the scandal exploded. And that brings us to part 5, the investigations and the messy aftermath. Because once Wynn was gone, it felt like the floodgates just burst open. The very same empire that had mesmerized the world with its choreographed fountains and spectacular shows was now being picked apart under the cold, sterile lights of investigators' offices. And what they started to find was so much worse than anyone had dared to imagine. In October of 2019, after a grueling 7-month investigation, the Nevada Gaming Control Board came forward with a 5-count, 23-page complaint against Steve Wynn himself. They discovered that complaints of harassment against him went all the way back to 2005, the very same year he was first given his executive license. The report's conclusion was blunt, stating that Wynn was simply not a person of good character, honesty, or integrity, and that he was completely unsuitable to have any association with the gaming industry. The findings were just devastating. Back in February of 2019, Wynn Resorts as a company had already been slammed with a record-breaking $20 million fine by Nevada regulators, the biggest fine in the state's entire history. It was a powerful message that the state was done protecting its one-time golden boy. And then it was Massachusetts' turn. Their investigation was every bit as ruthless and every bit as detailed. In April of 2019, the Massachusetts Gaming Commission dropped a 200-page report after they interviewed over 100 people across 6 different states. They found that Wynn's own executives knew about several of the allegations and actively hid them. They even learned that the company had deliberately failed to disclose major settlements, including that massive $7.5 million payout while applying for their casino license. Then on April 30th, 2019, the commission hammered Wynn Resorts with a $35 million fine, and they personally fined the new CEO, Matthew Maddox, another $500,000 for failing to launch an internal investigation when a complaint landed on his desk. They also forced the company to keep the CEO and chairman roles separate for the next 15 years, and to have a third-party monitor watching their every move for the foreseeable future. But in a move that stunned many, Massachusetts regulators decided to let the company keep its license. And just a few weeks after that, the $2.6 billion Encore Boston Harbor threw open its doors, but you'd notice the Wynn name had been quietly scrubbed from the sign. But the consequences were far from over. In July of 2023, after a years-long legal battle that climbed all the way to the Nevada Supreme Court, Steve Wynn himself agreed to a $10 million settlement, the biggest personal fine Nevada regulators had ever imposed. And as a condition of that deal, he promised to never again seek a gaming license in the state of Nevada. Officially, he admitted to nothing, but the writing was on the wall. His reign was finished. At the same time, a flood of shareholder lawsuits began to pour in, with pension funds and investors accusing the Wynn Resorts board of covering up what they knew. The company ultimately paid out $70 million to make those claims go away, and by the time the smoke cleared, the very empire that was once hailed as a beacon of luxury and innovation had been forced to pay over $55 million in regulatory fines, on top of tens of millions more in legal settlements. Every last cent of it was money earned from the very gamblers who had bought into his dream. And so we come to the final chapter, reflection and legacy. Once the chaos subsided, Wynn's name started getting scraped off buildings, from awards, from scholarships, from landmarks all across the nation. The University of Pennsylvania even stripped his name from a campus commons and a scholarship fund he'd established. In Boston, his name was wiped from the new Encore Resort before the first guest ever walked through the doors. But on the Vegas Strip, it's a different story. The name still shines in brilliant gold letters, Wynn and Encore, standing as reminders of everything he constructed and everything that was lost. Now, to be fair, the company did try to clean house. After 2018, Wynn Resorts completely overhauled its board with a slate of new members, including, notably, several women. Key executives aware of the situation, like the former head of HR and the general counsel, made their quiet exits. They brought in independent oversight, established a new hotline for complaints, fees, and rolled out new harassment policies that, at long last, offered employees some real protection. The man in charge now, CEO Craig Billings, has been focused on rebuilding that broken trust and steering the company out from under the shadow of its founder. And in many respects, the empire pulled through, with Wynn Resorts slashing its debt by a staggering $1.2 billion, announcing a massive $1 billion stock buyback program, and even securing the very first gaming license ever issued in the United Arab Emirates for a luxury resort set to open in 2027. And over in Macau, they successfully negotiated an extension of their casino license in December of 2022, cementing their place in the largest gambling market on the planet. So yeah, financially, the business made a comeback. But what about the soul of Las Vegas itself? That's the one thing you can't just fix with new marble floors and bigger fountains. Because while some good things did rise from the ashes, stronger protections for workers, a push for more transparency, the old Vegas, the one that valued loyalty and made an average person feel like a king for a day, is all but a memory. The minimums at the tables never dropped, the slot machines stayed tight, and those resort fees? They didn't disappear, they multiplied. And the very people who built this city, paycheck by paycheck, dream by dream, are now priced out of the very paradise they helped bring to life. For those of us who can still remember the old days, you know, the smoky lounges, the $5.95 steak dinners, the free drinks that always came with a genuine smile, it's impossible not to feel like we lost something much bigger than just one man's reputation. We lost the very heart of the city. Steve Wynn sold us all a dream, a vision of Vegas where everyone, whether you were rich or broke, could feel like they were a part of it all. And then, piece by piece, he sold that beautiful dream off to the highest bidder. So, where does that leave us? Well, maybe that's up to us now. Maybe it's up to the ones who still love this city, the ones who remember what it was supposed to be about. Because Las Vegas wasn't built by billionaires and high rollers. It was built by people just like us. It was built by the dreamers, the regulars, the people who came back time and time again because they believed in a city that, once upon a time, seemed to believe in them too.